Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another happy hour with the Maestro. You can tell it's a beautiful day here in the Lowcountry. I sound like Mr. Rogers a little bit, but I don't mean to. But it is a beautiful day, a beautiful, beautiful day, and I'm in my backyard. I thought, well, hey, it's 68 degrees. Why not sit in the backyard? And of course, it's happy hour, so we will have to have a lovely beverage. This is a wonderful white wine. We're going to give it a sip. Quite lovely. This is a Scout and Cellar Fieldhouse 301 Chardonnay. We're going to show a picture of it. And it's from a little tasting kit. And I'm going to show you. It's kind of hard to see in this small space, but you see this little kit, little box, 4 bottles. And each of the bottles is tiny, equal to about a quarter of a bottle of wine. And the reason I'm mentioning this to you is I'm currently doing tastings with Scout and Cellar wine, which is a clean crafted wine that is organic and biodynamic. So if anybody wants to do a tasting, virtual tasting, just get you a little set of these 4 bottles and we'll do a fun little tasting on the internet. It'll be really fun. Well, we have a very special guest that I'm going to introduce in just a moment. But before I do so, I do want to thank our sponsors. We have, of course, our season sponsor, the Bowen Company and its associates. Then we have the Gaylord and Dorothy Donnelly Foundation and the South Carolina Arts Commission, and all brought to you by Maestro Wines. Well, without further ado, I would like to introduce our special guest. He's been a member of the North Charleston POPS for a while now. He's an internationally recognized, terrifically talented violinist, composer, arranger, does lots and lots of stuff. Great guy. Please welcome to Happy Hour with the Maestro, James Anderson. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure to have you with us. So I just discussed my beverage, and I know that we were talking earlier, and you have a wonderful beverage from a local distillery. Tell us all about it.
I do, yeah. So I took a couple sips while you were doing your own promo to get reacquainted with it. So I'm drinking a Distant Fog IPA from a local brewery. Charlestown Fermentory is the local brewery. It's a fantastic IPA. Fancy myself a little bit of a amateur beer sommelier. So it's a nice.
Is that what they call it? A beer sommelier?
I made it right now. So if they don't,
that's a new term. We're going to put it in the dictionary. I got it.
So it's nice, bright, crisp IPA. This particular brewery kind of specializes in kind of hazy or unfiltered IPAs. So I believe this has Simcoe, Citra, and Amarillo hops in it. So
nice,
kind of citrusy IPA and really crisp and refreshing. It's really delicious.
That's great. Now, does it tell on the can what the IBU is? We're getting into very specific stuff.
I know. I understand. It doesn't have an IBU count on it, unfortunately. But I will say, as an avid IPA drinker, it is hoppy. So it's
on the hoppy side. So it would have a high number if there were a number.
It's definitely a high number. The alcohol content is about just a hair over 6%. So it's
okay. So it's a bigger.
It's a little bit bigger, not too beefy, but it's definitely bright and citrusy, and it has a good hop profile to it. So
that's nice. That's nice, and that's a great place too. And it's really conveniently located. That's such a Avondale area over there is just such a fun place to hang out because you've got distilleries, and you've got jeans, and you've got all those great places, the Pearl Oyster Bar and everything else. And it's kind of a hub for nice restaurants and, just a fun place.
Absolutely. Yeah. Nice kind of fun, local places, good food, good drinks, good crafts, and kind of artsy boutique stores. So
yeah.
They
used to have a really great, secondhand consignment store in that gigantic building, but it went away, unfortunately, and I don't know what they're going to do. I think they're going to have a restaurant there or something. So I was reading something about it. Yeah, wouldn't be surprised. But we're really thrilled to have you on the show with us, and many of our listeners are familiar with you through your work with the Pops, and also your wife Heather's work in the Pops, but also because recently you were on one of our virtual concerts, and that was a really fun show a couple of weeks ago of gypsy stuff, Django Reinhardt, Paris Cafe,
Yeah.
40s music. Really, it was a fun show. We had a lot of people check that out, and they really enjoyed it because it was just such a light, fun evening, and we really got a chance to see everybody shine in
Great.
that
Yeah.
performance. And I was really impressed by your improvisational skill on the violin. You know, that's something that a lot of classically trained players never really pick up.
Indeed. Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, I love improvising, and really found a taste for it when I guess I was about junior high, you know, high school age. You know, I grew up primarily classically trained and have always taken violin lessons since I was a little kid, but discovered playing fiddle tunes, and in high school I had a really exceptional jazz teacher that pushed me into kind of more of the improvising and jazz realm, and thankfully I had a lot of good fostering and encouragement in that world, which you're exactly right, is that most violinists don't get that, or it's kind of this one or the other situation where they either go, you know, fiddle tunes and improvise, and then which they don't read music much like a classical person does, or of course they, you know, only read and they can't improvise. So so luckily I was able to explore those equally, and studied a lot of jazz in college, and have been able to support myself quite a bit through playing fiddle music and jazz music as well.
That's great. And you grew up in a really nice part of the country for music, north of Denver. And tell us a little bit about where you grew up and your schooling in northern Colorado area.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Fort Collins, Colorado, like you said, just north of Denver. And yeah, it was a wonderful place to grow up. You know, beautiful, of course, beautiful part of the country, you know, surrounded by mountains. And so I'd spent a lot of time in the outdoors and camping, but did get a lot of great music exposure, you know, and again, a little bit of everything from great classical music with the Colorado Symphony, and some of the local regional symphonies like we were talking about, to excellent jazz. Denver has a great jazz scene. Fort Collins has always had a really good bluegrass and folk music scene. So luckily I was able to be exposed to a lot of things in northern Colorado. And yes, studied, you know, classical music through my private lessons. And like I mentioned, into high school years was studying folk music and jazz music. I used to go out to, Mark O'Connor used to hold fiddle conferences in Nashville and San Diego. And I used to go out to the San Diego conferences, and through those, you know, as a fiddler was really exciting, because it was, especially in those days, was the best of all the fiddlers in the world used to come to those. And so I would, you know, not only get to hear and be exposed to, but get to study with and hang out with, you know, Mark O'Connor and Daryl Anger and Christian Howes and some of these, you know, fiddle players that are just the best of the best in the world. So that was
that must have been a great experience for you. Yeah, absolutely. Mark O'Connor is great, and you know, again with him, sort of like exactly what you do. There's that real crossover nature, and his ability to write original compositions and then have them arranged for orchestra. I've been able to do some performances with him with orchestra, and it was really, really fun because you know, it was a blend of so many different styles, and you know, I mean, and that's really what a lot of our folk music in this country, aside from the African American tradition, but the Celtic tradition that came through, you know, the Appalachians early on, and that spawned bluegrass and a lot of other folk music traditions that we have. You know, the Carter family that's kind of started country western music in the mountains of Tennessee and all that. I mean, that's a really amazing tradition of music that luckily includes the violin.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I remember, you know, very vividly, of course, being a young, impressionable violin player. And it was The Devil Went Down to Georgia. You know, that I remember just being amazed that a violin, could do something like that. And a violin could make something, you know, so cool. You know, and so that had a big impression on me. And then coming into Mark O'Connor's world, and Mark O'Connor actually has a really funny kind of version of The Devil Went Down to Georgia. It's called The Devil Goes Back to Georgia.
Oh, yeah.
Sequel, and Mark O'Connor is just, it's incredible how well he plays it. So
That's great.
yeah. And so I got exposed to a lot of that stuff, and to just the possibilities of the violin, you know, and from bluegrass and country music and older styles like Celtic and Irish and Scottish and English, to Cajun music. And then it was, you know, Stefan Grappelli and hearing violin in the jazz world, and, you know, electric violinists like Jerry Goodman that would play with, you know, Mahavishnu Orchestra, and Jean-Luc Ponty, and the violin being in, you know, electrified and in rock and roll and, you know, crazy jazz and stuff like that. So, you know, so I just loved, I've always loved the violin, but it was seeing the violin in so many different contexts and different, you know, languages that made me just love it even more. So so I went to school. Yeah. So I wound up going to school, and I still, you know, all of my formal training, except for some studying in college in the jazz world, is really classical. But I've, you know, loved playing everything, and have always enjoyed playing the fiddle tunes. And I love tango music, and I was listening to Scandinavian fiddling earlier today, and again, this idea that the fiddle can fit into really any context from anywhere around the world has always been a big fascination for me.
I agree, and you know, there's just so many different traditions, like the Hardanger fiddle stuff in Norway and all that. I mean, it's just all kind of interconnected in some way, because it all stems from a folk tradition. And actually, you know, in some ways, the violin was always both a classical instrument and a folk instrument, even way back. I mean, some of the things that were written for the violin in the early times in the Baroque period were dances, really. I mean, they weren't necessarily, you know, I mean, they were adapted, you know, by people like Bach into really great classical pieces, but they were basically folk dances as much as anything else.
Yeah, I have a student right now that's working on, you know, one of the Handel violin sonatas, and, you know, and we were just talking the other day that, you know, this fourth movement, you know, of the F major sonata is really just a fiddle tune. And a lot of those, you know, Baroque sonatas turn into these jigs at the end, you know, and being a British, you know, being around this British music, I mean, they're really just fiddle tunes. And, you know, when I was learning a lot of this music, you know, fiddle music, for me, classical music was always much more difficult. And for me, classical music was really this kind of unattainable, you know, thing, you know, that you had to study classical music and you had to practice classical music, and fiddling for me was, you know, came a lot easier. And whether there's something to that about one being easier than the other, which I don't necessarily agree with. But I remember kind of this revelation of thinking, you know, that's why are fiddle tunes easier to speak, and why is classical music more difficult? And that you're exactly right, that they do have this overlap where a lot of, you know, it all is from the same tradition, and it all is from the same family tree, essentially, and being able to play a classical piece like a fiddle tune. And, you know, and of course you think of composers like Bartok, or, you know, even a lot of Stravinsky has, you know, like the Soldier's Tale is all kind of fiddling, you know, music, and Bartok is all this, you know, gypsy traditional folk music, and there's so much overlap in there. And of course we have, you know, Gershwin, and, you know, Heifetz doing these incredible arrangements of Gershwin jazz, and that they all talk to each other. And that was a big moment for me in my own studying, was that, you know, I had a lot of teachers that told me, you know, don't bother with that stuff, you know, don't waste your time. You know, that trash music, you know, classical music is what you should be studying. That's where you get good, and that kind of nonsense. But, you know, that if you studied, or when, at least in my experience, was studying all these different languages, really they helped each other. And the better I got at my fiddling, the better my classical music became. And the better I got at classical music, the better I got at fiddling. And improvising was a huge part of all of that too. So everything fed each other in a way that I'm glad I had, and I wouldn't have had if I had only focused on one of those things.
And I think that that's really true with anything, especially in music in particular. And I had the same experience as you, where I was a classically trained musician on several instruments and was a composer and all of that. But then I performed popular music in very, anything from, playing in a, electric bass in a rock band to playing tuba in a Dixieland band to playing double bass in a jazz quartet and all of that. And I think that those experiences really shape one's musical knowledge and understanding of music and the potential of music and make you much more rounded.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Plus,
So
it was
tell
always
us,
nice to, get a little bit of extra cash playing gigs and jazz gigs.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, when I was first married, when Dorothy and I were first married, I did a lot of gigs at night. I was never home because I was all, trying to make a little extra dough there.
Absolutely.
Crazy. So, tell us a little more. After graduation, you had the wonderful opportunity to go to London to study at the Guildhall School and had a lot of interesting experiences over there, not just in London, but in other parts of Europe as a performer and, got a lot of great training. Tell us a little bit about some of the things that happened while you're over there.
Yeah, so when I was doing my undergraduate in Colorado, our orchestra director was a British man, Dr. Russell Guyver, and he had attended the Guildhall School of Music and always spoke very highly about it. So for whatever reason, that really appealed to me, and I've always been drawn to studying abroad and traveling. So I looked into it and applied, and for whatever reason, got accepted to the Guildhall School of Music. So I wound up doing my master's degree in London and at the phenomenal school. And it was amazing. Yeah, I wouldn't do it for anything. It was such an incredible experience to live in London and to go to a school. Jacqueline Dupre had graduated from Guildhall School. Dave Holland, incredible jazz bass player, had graduated from Guildhall School. So to go to a place that had a sort of a legacy and an alumni list like that was, it was intimidating, of course, to go from relatively rural Colorado to London, but I just loved it. And it was, we shared a building with the London Symphony Orchestra. So we were regularly doing side-by-side rehearsals with the London Symphony. My private teacher there, was a finalist in the Tchaikovsky competition in Moscow. Really just incredible violin players. And, it was really fun to be, I used to love just hanging out in the practice rooms, actually, in the building.
Yeah, right.
You would hear, I have several friends now that I still keep in touch with that are members of, top European orchestras. And I remember practicing next door to the woman who wound up winning the gold medal, which is the biggest prize that the Guildhall offers for student performances. And she's, touring Europe now as a piano soloist. So just being around that environment of incredibly high level performers and incredibly high level teachers and incredibly high level ensembles was very inspiring and a little daunting and intimidating, but
that's such a great experience to have, especially when you're young, because it really exposes you to the greater world out there. It's so funny because so many times I'm talking to parents that have music students in high school, and one of the things I always tell them is, let your talented student experience other places other than where you live, because that gives you an opportunity to really see what's out there and give yourself a little bit of an opportunity to kind of measure, your progress and where you stand with other performers.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it was, like you said, it was incredible to see, the local orchestras, which was the London Symphony and the London Philharmonic and the BBC Orchestra, and to be able to go see those orchestras regularly, to see that level out there and to be next to those students that are, touring soloists is, being around that, I feel always, raises you to a certain level. Of course, I still have to practice. I practiced a lot, but but being just around that environment was so incredible. the teachers I had there were just remarkable, and so many great experiences. You know, I was able to perform at London's Wigmore Hall regularly. We had a partnership with the Wigmore Hall, which is arguably kind of, you know, London's Carnegie Hall, and
Sure.
And to be able to play in places like that, and you know, my wife is a historian, and so, you know, the history in me, you know, I mean, of course, London, and you know, it's kind of like, and Charleston is in a lot of ways similar. You know, such an old place, and
yes,
be in a place like Wigmore Hall that's been around for hundreds of years, and to be walking, I just loved London in general, you know, to be walking, you know, I remember walking, my sister came to visit, and we were walking down a street, and there were plaques, you know, here was the stock market in 1250, you know, and
yeah.
That's
the thing about London. It's
not something was here, you know, 400 years before we were a country, you know, 500 years before we were a country. So, you know, to be in an environment like that is incredible. And of course, Europe is, you know, in my experience, at least, you know, to be in a country that fostered the arts in the way that England did, and to be in a city that fostered the arts the way that London did. You know, we would go to the proms. We were, the year that we were there, we were able to catch the proms at the beginning and the end of the term. So to go see concerts at the proms, which is the biggest, you know, classical music festival in the world, and to go see concerts at Wigmore Hall, and to go see concerts, you know, at Barbican. So it was just, you know, the amount of just stuff happening.
Yeah, and you know, for people that don't know much about the proms, for example, I mean, that's a whole summer full of concerts where it's almost every day of the week you'll hear a different orchestra. And London per capita has more professional orchestras than any other city in the world. It has maybe 6 full-time professional orchestras of really high quality. So when you go to the proms, you're hearing, you know, almost every night these great orchestras, and what they do is make sure that the ticket prices are reasonable for anybody. So, you know, you don't have to pay a huge amount of money to see a really great orchestra on a regular basis, and that's one of the wonderful things about having that kind of opportunity. Right.
Yeah. I remember, paying, I mean, £5, you know, $5 basically to go see these top world-class orchestras and world-class soloists. And I remember the thing that struck me too, I remember standing in line for one of the proms, and that's kind of part of the prom experience, is that you line up early, and you wait in line, and you to get these really, really cheap tickets. And so I remember standing in line talking with people roughly my age, you know, and these were people, you know, having these conversations they were talking as much about Brahms and Bruckner as they were talking about modern pop artists, you know, talking about, I'm trying to remember who was popular in 2008 and 2009, you know, but being able to, you know, talk to people that were as in love with modern music and popular music. Amy Winehouse, that's who it was at the time. Talking about Amy Winehouse and Adele in the same breath as we were talking about Brahms and Bruckner, you know, and that was as equally as important, and that they were such on a level basis, whereas my experience here in the States was those were 2 totally separate worlds. So to be in a place that mixed them a little bit more, to me, was just incredible.
It's so weird, you know, that you mentioned that, because when I was over there, and I've been there now several times to record at Abbey Road with the London Philharmonic, which has been amazing. And so we stayed in this hotel. It was this old house, so it was this boutique hotel, and there was a big plaque on that. You know, they have these plaques all over London, as you mentioned.
Sure, the blue plaques,
yeah, they're great. And it said, you know, in this house, the psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud lived every summer for, you know, many, many years doing research, you know. And then next door was a pub, and then there was a little plaque there. And actually, it wasn't the same blue plaque, like historical marker, but it was a plaque that had this thing about how Amy Winehouse used to hang out this pub all the time. Which was right next to where Sigmund Freud. It's just like such a crazy mix of people.
It's so bizarre. Actually, the first flat I lived in, when we lived there, we bounced around a little bit, but we primarily stayed in West London, and Kensington was where we lived. First place we lived was Elgar. Lived, like 4 houses down, and that was like our welcome to England. Was we had this flat that we were paying an exorbitant amount of money for. It was just,
of course,
to live in the shoebox, but Elgar lived, down the street, and so to be connected like that. And then, like you said, and then my wife literally bumped into Lenny Kravitz later that year. Down the street, we lived around the corner from, I think it was Universal. All the record labels were in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
So we'd bump into, these rock stars, and then Elgar down the street, and to just be in a place like that was incredible, and a lot of great opportunities. And I still have a lot of good friends there, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Well, that's terrific. So how did you end up in the Lowcountry?
So after studying in England, essentially we ran out of money, and I finished my master's degree. My wife, Heather, wanted to continue on to a doctorate, and she also studied in England. We lived in separate. We went to separate schools, lived in the same building, went to separate schools. And so she wanted to continue on a doctorate. So we wound up moving to Austin, Texas after that. And that was where I kind of started my formal music career and living. And she finished her doctorate there. And after about 10 years, just shy of 10 years in Austin, she had her doctorate, and she got a job here in the Lowcountry. She teaches at Claflin University in Orangeburg. So that was the job that brought us down here, and here we are.
Great. Wonderful. Well, this is such a great place to be. And again, in the Lowcountry, we have those sort of historical connections with all different ages and times, which is wonderful. That really brings a wonderful resonance to this whole area, and just walking the streets and seeing, all of these beautiful buildings in downtown Charleston and all throughout the whole area. It's just amazing. So in addition to performing with us and the North Charleston Pops, you do a lot of other things. And tell us a little bit about that touring gig you have with the tango band. That's really fascinating.
Yeah. So I play with a tango group called the Astra Piazzolla Quintet, which is a group that I founded while living in Austin. And it was founded to play the music of Astor Piazzolla. So we were based in Austin. We played Piazzolla, and there were 5 of us. So that was Astra Piazzolla Quintet.
Now tell us a little bit about, for those of our listeners who are not familiar with Astra Piazzolla, tell us a little bit about that composer and the style of music he did. Piazzolla
is kind of mostly known for being the grandfather of what we now call Nuevo Tango, which is new tango music. He was a composer that primarily worked, kind of 60s, 70s, 80s, was performing and writing in the 40s and 50s, but kind of heyday was more the 60s, 70s, 80s. And he really kind of revolutionized tango music. And there's an old saying in tango music that everything can change except tango music. Tango music had kind of, tango music's really fascinating in that it has a really similar history to American jazz. They both kind of start around the same time. They're both kind of born out of the same, socioeconomic classes, and they're both, New Orleans versus Buenos Aires, and port cities and immigrant influence. So they really have a similar history. And if you think of, jazz being, the swing eras of the 30s and the 40s, tango music was what we now call the Guardia Vieja, which is the old school, or the Epoca de Oro, which is the golden era of these great tango orchestras of the 30s and 40s. And so tango music had kind of, I'm sure the tango scholars are going to roll their eyes at this, but it hit a little bit of a staleness there, and didn't change much, didn't evolve much past the 30s and 40s of great kind of classic tango music. It was just happening very slowly until Piazzolla came along. And Piazzolla had actually studied with Nadia Boulanger, and so he had this incredible classical music foundation and this very high level training, compositional training, and brought in essentially all these outside elements to tango music. He brought in a lot of classical music. He brought in a lot of avant-garde music. The music of Bartok and Stravinsky again are, kind of big influences of Piazzolla, and kind of reorganize tango music into more of a concert music, and then instead of a dance music. And even today, when we play milongas, which are, tango dance events, when we play milongas, people today still argue about, can you actually dance to Piazzolla? Are you supposed to sit down and listen to Piazzolla? And it can get a little heated in the tango dance hall about what do we do with this music, and is it tango, is it not tango, and it's really fascinating. So tango music has been a love of mine since I discovered it in my undergraduate about 2003. So I've been playing tango music for a long time now, and this group again was started to play the music of Piazzolla, and we play a lot of Piazzolla's music still now. Of course, actually, we're just finishing an album. Piazzolla has a really famous suite of the Four Seasons that are kind of styled after Vivaldi, but of course, Piazzolla-ized. And so we're finishing a recording of those. But our piano player, and subsequently myself and our bandoneon player, started writing all this great new tango music. So we do a lot of original work now. Our piano player has written many pieces for us. I've written several. We have a bandoneon player, which is the tango accordion, who lives in Seattle. He's writing great music for us. So it's turned into this group that's new music and new compositions and new tango, and has become a lot of fun. But we've been fortunate enough to get a lot of great work around the whole country, and we've done some great couple gigs in Canada, and we premiered a tango ballet with the Colorado Ballet, which was really exceptional, and got to perform in their great concert hall. And we recently did a concert with the Wilmington Symphony Orchestra in North Carolina, and did a lot of kind of symphonic versions of some of our pieces and some of Piazzolla's work as well. So it's a really incredible group that has done a lot of great things that I'm very proud of.
That's terrific. So speaking of composing, you mentioned some compositional stuff earlier. You are a composer and arranger, right? And tell us a little bit about your work, original work, and arrangements you've done. And and then after that, we're going to talk about a concert coming up too. But before we do that, let's hear a little bit about your stuff.
Yeah. So I've always loved writing, and I think it comes from the improvising that I've always done, and this kind of creating music rather than interpreting it necessarily. So I've been using my COVID time, my abundance of free time in COVID, to kind of focus on some composing and some writing. I've always written music, but I started writing kind of seriously with my tango group, with APQ, and composing for that group, and kind of projects that have grown out of that group. I actually work with a piano trio that has kind of grown out of that group. So I've been using my abundance of COVID time to kind of focus on some writing, and I've been trying to write music that is, what we would kind of consider classical music. I'm, writing mostly for string orchestras or string quartets, and writing music that is influenced by other genres of music is kind of where I've, found my voice, if you will. So writing things that, writing tango music, and writing music that's influenced by Appalachian fiddling. And I'm working on a Irish kind of music, Irish piece now. And I love Scandinavian music. So I've written a piece that's kind of based around Scandinavian fiddling. So mariachi music, being from, living in Texas for so long, had a lot of exposure to great mariachi music. So trying to incorporate a lot of those elements that have, in a lot of ways become kind of fashionable in the classical music world. It's like, finally, it's kind of okay to play a lot of this music and to program it alongside great classics. So trying to write music for string orchestras and, particularly student ensembles. I'm kind of marketing my music more towards high school groups and young college groups that do kind of focus on some of these other styles of music.
Well, that's terrific. And as I mentioned, we have another cool gig that's going to be featuring you. It's going to be our next virtual concert, actually tomorrow night. It's going to be on the 13th, Friday at 7. And this will be broadcast on the North Charleston POPS, or excuse me, the North Charleston Coliseum and Performing Arts Center Facebook page. Not the one we're on right now, which is the North Charleston POPS Facebook page. So that will be broadcast, and that will be featuring a quartet of musicians from the North Charleston POPS and several of our regular members, Robbie Kenny, Ryan Silvestri, you, of course, and Idris Chandler. It's called the Stage Quest Quartet, and they will be featuring several of your works in addition to other stuff.
Yeah. I think we're planning on doing some holiday music. We're going to try to incorporate some Piazzolla and do some other things, but they were kind enough to let me submit a couple pieces. So we're going to do a tango of mine that's in kind of the older style, what we call tipica tango, of older school tango. So, but it's a fun one that I'm really proud of, that does have some kind of, a lot of tango music has these really cool percussive effects in it that the violins and the strings get to do. So this one will incorporate some of those. And then we're going to do a piece of mine entitled Nothing Gold Can Stay, which is a title of a Robert Frost poem about nature and the fleeting beauty of nature. And it's a little bit more inspired by Appalachian fiddling. It kind of has a Copeland, Appalachian Spring-esque kind of opening to it, and kind of more fiddly type piece. So I think those are going to be the two that we're going to do. I might have one more if I can sneak it in by tomorrow, but we'll see.
Great. Well, that's wonderful. And it's terrific that we get a chance to hear you on the virtual concert series one more time after the wonderful auspicious debut that you had a few weeks ago with the trio. And we're really excited to have you as a member of the orchestra. Now, tell us a little bit before we leave you about your family.
I have an awesome family. My wife, Heather, is a brilliant musicologist. She studies music history and focuses kind of on race and gender issues with American music and civil rights music. So she teaches at Claflin University. She's also a fantastic viola player and has been seen in the Pops Orchestra as well.
Yeah, of course.
Of course. But we welcomed a young little daughter to our lives about a year and a half ago. So Cecilia is our little daughter. And really, that's kind of been the bulk of my COVID time, actually. Instead of composing is playing with my little girl. So we have a lot of fun, and she's just a bright, awesome young little kid, and we've been having a lot of fun trying to figure out how to parent and be grown-ups. But I get to be a little kid with her for most of the day, so it's a lot of fun.
And it's funny how much children teach us.
Indeed.
It really is amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. She's just a ball. So we have a lot of fun.
That's great. Well, it's been really fun getting to know you a little bit, and for our audience to get to know you and to put the face with the name, with the talent all together. And it really enriches their understanding of what we do as an orchestra with the North Charleston POPS and our virtual performances as well. And we have so many members of our community that are so excited to know that our members have such amazing depth, as you do, in so many different areas with great training and great experiences, and are able to do so many different things in music so well. So we really appreciate you taking the time, James, to be with us, and we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow night at 7 in the virtual series from the Performing Arts Center. So thanks again, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to tomorrow, and thanks for all you do and helping make such a great music community here in the Lowcountry. So thank you again so much.
My pleasure.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, thanks again to James Anderson. We were thrilled to have him as a guest tonight, and we invite everybody to tune in, and I will make sure to tell you the correct information, which is the North Charleston Coliseum and Performing Arts Center Facebook page will be broadcasting the concert at 7. The group is called Stage Quest Quartet. Is put together by our principal violist with the North Charleston Pops, Robbie Kenny. We're really excited about that evening tomorrow night. And in the meantime, I want to thank, again, our sponsors, the Bowen Company, the Gaylord and Dorothy Donnelly Foundation, South Carolina Arts Commission, and Maestro Wines. We would love to do a virtual tasting of wine with you at some point soon. But in the meantime, let's keep the music going. And we look forward to being back on the stage at the Performing Arts Center after the first of the year. January 23rd is the date that we are going to be looking forward to performing on, with our Music of the Nights, music of Paul McCartney, Sir Elton John, and Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber. So we're really thrilled about that. But in the meantime, we have some other great stuff for you to enjoy from the Pops. Thanks again for tuning in to Happy Hour with the Maestro. I'm Nick Palmer, music director and conductor of the North Charleston Pops. Have a great evening and a great weekend. See you soon.